I know people get really, really obsessed with steps. And it's one of those things like, all right, we don't need to become obsessed with it. We just need to use it as a trend. Oh, wow, I was pretty active today. Yeah. Oh, wow, I really didn't do much the past 2 days. Like, I need to go for a walk. This is how I need to change my schedule moving forward. Welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin and Karina. Each week, we share the evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients to help you look, feel, and perform your best. So this week, I'm joined by Coach Karina.
Hey guys.
And we're going to cover a topic that we get asked a lot about, which is, should you track your steps? And we're not just going to talk about steps. We're going to talk about all different things like fitness trackers, NEAT, what steps should look like for clients, and just different research involved here, because it really is super important. I feel like a lot of people downplay this, right? Because they think that like training is like enough.
Yeah, and people think that you burn way more calories working out for like 90 minutes a day than you really do.
And let's be honest, most people are not working out for 90 minutes anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, not hard enough to make a significant impact compared to the rest of your day. Like when you think about like the percentage relative to the other 24 hours, like how sedentary are you, that those like 60 to 90 minutes of training is not gonna like make a huge dent in terms of like putting you in a deficit if that is your goal.
Yeah, and even if it's not your goal, just maintenance. I find that people, like clients that we work with and ourselves too, like the more, I mean, it's obvious, but the more active that we are, it's just way easier to maintain. But it's not like it's that hard to do it. Like just going for like 2 10-minute walks. Like
or
doing
like
that,
standing at your desk if you have a standing desk, or just
setting a timer to like move around if you don't. Like for me, honestly, I drink so much water that I don't really have to set a timer because I get up all the time to go to the bathroom.
Taking the stairs whenever you can.
Doing those little things really, really add up, and they're not that like monumental to where it's like you need to add in another really hard workout. Like it's something that is pretty easy. You can do it literally anywhere, and it has such a big impact. So first, let's talk about fitness trackers, because we get obviously a lot of questions about those, understandably. So we have the Oura Ring. If
Mine
you're
is
watching,
in the car.
If you're watching, I'm like moving my hands in a very creepy fashion. So there's the Oura Ring, which to my knowledge is like the only like thing that looks like this, right?
I don't know of another ring bio tracker at all. I really prefer the ring because I've had all of the wrist wearables. I've gone through Fitbit, Apple Watch, the Whoop band. I've had all of those. And
those are the only ones, right? I'm trying to think if there's
maybe there's one I don't know about, like an underground product that I don't know about. But I don't do well with having things on my wrist. Like I don't like sleeping with things on my wrist, so it was like really hard for me to keep those on. And so I prefer the ring 100 times more.
I know a lot of people like the Apple Watch because it's kind of like a phone.
That would drive me crazy.
But that is why I hate it.
I can't see text messages on my wrist 24/7.
I have all my notifications for everything turned off.
Like getting calls, like
oh my god, the stress. No, that would be so. For me, the Apple Watch was always like a hard no. I think that because we've had the Oura Ring now. I think I got it like a little bit before you, but not like that much. So let's say it's like been a few months. I like it. I don't really notice it. The only time I really notice it is if I'm like really grabbing a barbell. And I probably shouldn't wear it to work out because it is getting scratched, but like it's whatever.
Yeah, that's why I forgot. I don't have mine on now because I took it off for a barbell workout that we were doing earlier.
Yeah,
if you're don't want it scratched. But and so I would say that's like the only downside of it.
Well, and it doesn't really track training.
Yeah, so you have to put them in manually.
Which I do think that
But for my purposes, and we'll talk about this when we talk about that mass study, like it's okay because I need to see because I'm pretty sedentary outside of training. Like I know I'm active during training, but like I need to do a better job of like walking around a bit more. So that's okay for me. But I could see how some people really like the Apple Watch because you can say, okay, I'm about to start working out, and then it tracks it while you're working out. And
I think the Whoop band, is it Whoop or?
I say Whoop. Some people say Whoop.
Okay,
I say Whoop.
I think it's Whoop. I'm like, I don't know what the debate is, like, but Whoop is how I say it. So in case you guys are like cringing super hard, that's how I'm going to say it for the remainder of the podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that one does a pretty good job at tracking training from what it sounds like from people.
It does. The only reason I didn't like the Whoop band,
it's fucking atrocious looking. First of all, like, let's get the.
Well, first of all, like, it's so hard for me to like have something on my wrist that doesn't tell the time. Like, hello, like, but also
it is so fucking ugly.
Yeah, well, maybe it was because I had an earlier version because I got it like right when it came out, but I had to recharge it all the time. Like, the battery was so bad that I would forget to put it back on. And so I was like, well, I'm never collecting data, so I don't. And it's like $30 a month.
Yeah,
I
which
think
sounds cheap,
but it's not.
It's not.
If you're doing it for multiple years up front, whereas the Oura Ring is a few $100s up front, and that's it. Like,
it was when I priced it out, because that was the two that I was between.
Yeah.
Because I've had a Fitbit before, and I just, like I said, the Apple Watch was like a hard no, and the Oura Ring was $300, and I had a 2-year warranty, and the Whoop band would have been $360 for 2 years. So I was like, well, it's already more expensive, and I fucking don't want to wear this. So no matter how great and amazing the data is. But I would say that the Oura Ring definitely focuses a little bit more on sleep, I feel like.
It's definitely more of like,
it's always
it was made to track sleep.
Yeah.
But it like has all these other things as the periphery. And the first time I actually heard about the Oura Ring was like 3-4 years ago when it was like a beta product that the University of South Florida, like the health department, was doing research on like NASA analog missions, and they were tracking sleep, and it wasn't like an official product yet. So Dom and Andrew like had like the testing version, and back then it was like an inch thick, like it looked way different. Yeah, but I really like it.
It's always yelling at us.
I know.
Like, what did it say last week? Mine was like, time to reflect. I was like, bro, okay,
it judges you as well.
I'm really feeling attacked right now. I know I need to reflect on my current life decisions.
We were up till like 1:30 a.m. We had a few drinks. Like, we needed to reflect.
when me and Chanel were in Nashville, like every day kept getting worse. She's like, I can't hang out with you. Like, my HRV and like recovery just goes to shit when we hang out.
Yeah. Oh my god.
But so with any kind of tracker though, whichever one that you decide that you want to get, like we said, we're both fans of Oura Ring just because it's really easy. I like how it looks. Like, I don't feel like I need to take it off to do anything.
It looks good with anything too. Like, I find it so weird when people wear like dresses and then like have an Apple Watch on. I'm like, please stop.
Yeah, no,
the ring looks so nice.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah.
But whichever one that you decide to get, always recognize that it's never going to be like perfect. Right. There's like some aspect of it is going to be like, there's going to be pros and cons to all of them, right? And regardless of which one that you get, it doesn't really matter what the numbers are. It just matters like the trends.
Right. So they're never going to be accurate, but they, as long as they are consistent,
that's going to be able to give you like, okay, like if I were to wear an Oura Ring and a Fitbit and a Whoop band, they would probably all say different things, but it doesn't really matter. It's just like if you had 3 scales, they would be 3 different numbers most likely.
Yeah.
But it's more about like
the trends.
Yeah, the trends.
Yeah.
And so even like with Oura Ring, and Fitbit used to do this too. Like, they break down like the sleep stages, right? Like, they break down awake, REM, non-REM, and deep sleep. Or sorry, not non-REM, light sleep. Well, it's non-REM, but yeah. So that's never going to be perfect, right? Like, it's a estimate, you know. I definitely think that the technology is way better than it used to be, like versus like a few years ago, but it's still never going to, like, you can't look at that and get so caught up with it, like, and be like, oh my gosh, my whole day is ruined because my sleep score is low, or this, that. It's just, you should use it as a trend, or even like the steps, right? Like, I know people get really, really obsessed with steps, and it's one of those things like, all right, we don't need to become obsessed with it. We just need to use it as a trend. Oh wow, I was pretty active today. Yeah. Oh wow, I really didn't do much the past 2 days. Like, I need to go for a walk. This is how I need to change my schedule moving forward. And we're gonna go over some practical stuff for like step goals at the end.
And I will speak to a little bit of the obsession thing, just because I've been there before, and I've been able to like learn a bit more over the years. Like, what about my personality tends to like get obsessive over it is that like I'm a very like, if I don't get good or optimal, like, I have failed, right? So it's like, I just want to be successful at this simple thing every single day. But sometimes, like, I just won't be able to sleep. Like, I have to be up late working or school. And so those are the times where...
Or eating donuts.
Yeah, or eating donuts.
Like, let's...
Yeah. Or being a degenerate.
Let's be honest.
But, like, again, that's where I started to notice, like, oh, like, this is how this starts to happen. Is like, after 3 days in a row of like not telling me like I have done good, I'm like, oh my god, like I'm a horrible person, like, and like that's very an irrational way to think. However, like just being objective about that and saying like, oh, you know, just because I haven't hit like within the optimal range doesn't mean I need to continue to obsess over this. Let me just try to be 1% better. Like it's not the end all be all.
And just the fact that it is a technology already puts us at a higher risk for, like, it always has that addictive quality to it, right? Because when you have it, like, you want to check it. Like, I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm just curious. You know what I mean? And you just want to see, like, where are my steps today? How was my sleep? Yeah. And then you can see how that can, like, turn into, like, oh, where am I at? How many? Oh, I only got 4,000. I want to get 5,000 now. I want to do, and it just becomes this thing. So if there are things, like if there's notifications, I would probably turn those off. Yeah. And just kind of maybe check it once or twice a day. Like just don't necessarily like lose your mind over it, because that can really become an issue. So fitness trackers can be really good, but you need to be objective about them. Mm-hmm. And regardless of what the numbers say, you just need to use the same tool and gauge it off of that. Mm-hmm. Because one tool is going to vary a lot from, like, each tool is going to vary a lot. So one thing that we, within kind of steps and all of this, is just the idea of going for walks. And we talked about this when we first kicked it off, like just being a little bit more active has made a huge difference in our lives, mm-hmm. And in our clients' lives. And there is some cool research on this. So if you guys know that we love Dr. Huberman, so we're gonna quote him again as usual.
Dr. Huberman, if you're listening to this, we'd love to have you on our podcast.
Bro, I know, but
I would literally cry.
Right? But that's never gonna happen.
Don't say that.
I'm just being negative, but maybe I should reach out.
I'm gonna be the optimist here and say that Dr. Huberman, if you want to be on our podcast,
just speak it into existence. That's what
we
that
are
book
academics.
says.
Like we get it, you know. Okay, go on.
We get it.
Hopefully Danielle clips this and we can send it to him. This is my audition tape.
You're gonna be like,
no.
Block, delete, block.
Hard pass.
So one of the things about walks that's so great, so using his words, forward ambulation, aka moving forward, so walking. But forward ambulation could be biking, right? Like it could be other things, but walking is probably going to be a little bit easier. First thing in the morning, we talk about doing morning walks, right? Like part of it is like for the sun exposure, but part of it is this forward ambulation. First thing decreases activity in the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that detects fear and like threat perception. So, you know, obviously that's going to have you more anxious and a little just more on edge. And you're also able to experience optic flow, which creates changes to the nervous system. So again, just really positive ways to set your nervous system up in a way first thing in the morning that you are less stressed. You are still alert and focused, but you're not like pushed past that anxious. Yeah. And that's something that he talks about a lot, is like the idea of like being alert and focused, but not like too stimulated.
Yeah, and optic flow means just the passing of objects like through, like past your eyesight.
Mm-hmm. So like walking and biking are both really good ways to accomplish this. And if you can time it with an outdoor situation, which is now getting you to like see obviously like nature and sunlight. And I know we mentioned this before, but like it doesn't, like even if it's like cloudy, it doesn't seem like it's that bright out. It is still significantly brighter than being inside doing that. Like, and even if like, you're in the gym with like your little light over you, like that's not going to be as bright as like outside.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend like just an easy way for people to get more steps is to just go for these walks. And they also have these other benefits of helping set your circadian rhythm, and help you just feel more like alert but calm instead of so anxious. And I don't know, I'll wake up sometimes and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm like so flustered. Yeah. And the last thing that I want to do is like go for a walk. But like literally if I don't give myself that option, it's like I wake up, wash my face, do whatever, maybe do some emails, and then I'm like, okay, getting moving. I feel so much better. Like
Yeah.
it literally sets the tone. Like a 10-minute walk outside literally changes things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to also point out that it's going to be better if you can get direct sunlight as well.
Yes.
Like it's a lot brighter than it coming in through a window. Because I know some people are like, will go to work in the morning and like they're by a window and that's their sun exposure. But it would be a lot better if you could maybe get up a little bit earlier, try to get outside.
Yeah, and understandably, it can be hard with certain timing. That's why I have that like lamp, like that light on my bathroom counter. It's like happy light or something, I don't know, and it's made for like, you know, when it's like really dark out, and obviously like light is associated with mood, so I just have it on there that I'll just turn it on like when I'm getting ready. And it's certainly not as bright as going outside, but again, it's something. And I find that helps like a ton. So just going for walks, we've talked about those benefits for you know, kind of like, again, mood, alertness, circadian rhythm, but also that's just a really, really easy way to get in these steps. And it's doesn't really matter. You can do that anywhere. It's cost free. It literally all it takes is your time, and it doesn't need to be that long either. You don't need to go for you know, a 45-minute hike somewhere like amazing. Like just get outside and go for 10 minutes. Like, around your block. Like that's all you need to do. I think a lot of times we hear stuff like this and we like get overwhelmed with like, oh, this seems like so much to do. It's like, no, it's really actually easy, especially if you break it down. Like if you were to tell somebody to like do something for 30 minutes straight, that's a lot more of an ask versus like, hey, let's do it for 2 to 3 times for 10 minutes at like different time points. Like that's a lot easier to accomplish because we all have like little sandwiches of time that like we can do stuff, but like 30 minutes like in one chunk is a lot harder than like 3 10-minute chunks. So why not do that instead?
No, absolutely.
Now, another interesting thing about just kind of like activity is this idea of NEAT. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this is actually, I read this paper years ago and I absolutely love it. I just think it's so interesting. I did highlight where what they said NEAT was, just so there was like their working definition. And
as NEAT is becoming a bit more like quote unquote popular, I would say there's a lot more research coming out on NEAT as just having quite a significant impact on overall like caloric expenditure and its impact on body composition, which just looking at it face value, it's like, okay, what is me fidgeting going for a 5-minute walk like gonna do? But it really does add up over time in terms of just your ability to maybe maintain a set point or a certain body composition that you're comfortable with. And I really like that this is becoming a quote unquote thing that's being researched because it's so easy. Like I don't have to like run a marathon every day, you know?
No.
Like you just have to go for some walks or set a timer for 5 minutes every 2 hours, like just to get up if you are at a 9-to-5 desk job.
So there was a study and they took, now it's a small study, but still pretty interesting. There were 16 non-obese adults and for 8 weeks they ate in 1,000 calorie surplus. So like that's a pretty hefty surplus. Like they're eating good. And what was really interesting about this was that the fat gain varied tenfold amongst the volunteers. And meaning that like the gain ranged from 0.36 kilos to 4.23 kilos. That's really interesting. Like that's like a really big variability. Like that's like a lot. So they're all overfed the same amount. So what is contributing here? This is the definition I did highlight. So NEAT is the thermogenesis that accompanies physical activities other than volitional exercise, such as activities of daily living, fidgeting, spontaneous muscle contraction, maintaining posture when not recumbent, etc. So literally anything that like, you know, if you're really animated when you're talking and like you're just kind of moving around and like, oh, let me go up and get this. And we've all been in places, especially if you have been dieting, where you're like, I'll just get it later. Right?
Or you're like leaning on things more rather than like actually actively standing.
Or not like being like expressive when you're talking. Like if that's like your norm, like that's my norm. Obviously anybody who's ever spoken to me knows that. And then when I get like very deep into a diet, like I'm still expressive, but not nearly as much.
Yeah.
So it is like, it's all dependent on your baseline, right? Like if you aren't, you don't have a lot of NEAT, then it's not really going to change that much. But if you are high NEAT, this is something interesting. So there have been some studies where they showed that this was like, has shown a lot of these individual differences between weight gain. So what they found here was that NEAT proved to be the principal mediator of resistance to fat gain with overfeeding. The average increase in NEAT, which was 336 calories a day, accounted for 2/3 of the increase in daily energy expenditure. And the range of NEAT in our volunteers was large. It went from -98 to plus 692 calories per day. However, most importantly, changes in NEAT directly predicted resistance to fat gain with overfeeding, and this predictive value was not influenced by starting weight. So literally the range here was so vast between like the fat gain being very low to kind of significantly high. I mean, that's like 10 pounds in 8, like that's pretty significant weight gain. And going from like virtually like negative calories expended to like almost 700, like that's like a huge range. And part of this, like they said, is going to be like genetic, right? Like some people just naturally do this more. Mm-hmm. But knowing that this literature exists and knowing that what we're talking about, you can make an effort to, not saying you need to like start fidgeting, like you don't need to listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, I need to fidget more. Like you don't need to do that if that's not what you naturally do. But just go for a walk, or like Karina said, like set a timer if you really need to, or if you just drink more water, you'll have to get up and go to the bathroom, and stuff like that. Like it really does make a difference. Park a little bit farther, taking the stairs, like.
Yeah, it's so funny when you talk about it being genetic, because I like truly believe that. My dad makes a joke all the time that like it's got to be a Noboa thing, because anytime like any of us has a day off, we're like, all right, I gotta like fix something around the house, or I gotta like clean something. Like we just like can't like relax, which double-edged sword. But I definitely feel that way. Like if I'm just laying by the pool on a Sunday, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go crazy. Like I have to move around.
Yeah, even if it's like I gotta get up and go in the pool, and then I gotta like get out, and then I gotta like walk around.
Yeah. But yeah, and I that's.
Or even like when we went to Orlando, we were like, oh, we're gonna go to Starbucks. And it was like a 10-minute walk. Like we didn't need to walk there. We could have easily drove there, but we're like, oh, we'll just walk. Yeah. And like stuff like that. And the elevator broke. Oh. Yeah, we took so many stairs, but and also like to be empathetic, because I spend time with you, and like it's so natural. Like when we hang out together, like, oh, let's take the stairs. Like, oh, let's walk to Starbucks. And I'll hang out with other people, and like a 10-minute walk is like, no, like that's so far. But, I would say if you're not one of those people, just start small. Like go for like 5-minute walks, 10-minute walks. Try to take the stairs at least once a day if you're someone who has access to an elevator. But that's a super interesting study. I really love it when like science can like clearly lay it out, like, hey, like this has a pretty significant impact in a more controlled setting. Like, I mean, 1,000 calorie surplus. Now, this is a small study. It's not like it's, the end all be all, but it's something that the mechanism makes sense. We see it in practice, and okay, cool. There's also a study to back this up. Yeah. It was just so vast. Like what I just appreciated about this study was, one, that it was not, the weight gain was not affected by their starting weight. That's interesting, because obviously you would think, okay, that might influence some of it. It makes logical sense that like higher NEAT would protect against gaining more, but it still is interesting to see such a robust difference. Like if you're looking at just the average, you see, okay, what is the average increase? But then when you look at like actually like the low end and the high end, that's what's just so interesting to me. Is like how different that really is. And then circling this back to fitness trackers as kind of like a feedback mechanism, is like, I think that's what's so great about them. Like I know some people can like demonize it as being like very obsessive, but I think it's a really great way to encourage us throughout the day to move more, as something that like changes our behavior. So there is a study going on at USF. I don't know. I do know that I can share this because it is public information. I don't know any of the data, so I wouldn't be sharing that. No, it's like currently in progress.
but it's a study looking at behavioral changes in obese patients with a CGM. So if they can see their blood glucose levels throughout the day, how does that change their food choice? Yeah. And so that's something, when I can afford it down the road, that I would love to be able to do for a little bit, but they are super pricey right now.
Oh, they are.
And I'm like, I'm fine with the ring for right now.
They are so expensive. And it was just not, I mean, I had thought about that too, just out of pure curiosity. Yeah. But I could never with jujitsu.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Not work.
Yeah, and I actually talked to a friend who has done like all of the biohacking devices, and I was like, between a CGM and a ring, because she has both, and she was like, honestly, because you eat so healthy, you'd probably get bored looking at the CGM because you eat pretty consistently after the first 2 weeks, whereas the Oura Ring, it's a little bit cooler to kind of see those changes as your life changes.
And if you really wanted to, you could just use a glucometer more.
Right.
I mean, it's not the same thing.
It's not continuous.
Obviously. But because you don't have diabetes, it's not at like a life-threatening situation where you have a little bit more leeway. If you really wanted to nerd out, you could take your blood every hour if you wanted to.
But I'm super excited to see how this study pans out. It's like a 2-year study.
Nice.
So they're going to be looking at just how people viewing their CGMs changes the way they live, the way they eat, how they move. And so I think there is going to be like the research on behavioral changes due to fit trackers and all those things is going to be really interesting, and I'm obviously a huge proponent for it. Like, it definitely changes my life, and how just to have something like reminding me.
It's kind of like a coach, right? It's like you have that accountability, like, okay, I'm going to check in with somebody every week, and not saying that that's the reason why you make those changes, but it is certainly useful when you are like thinking like, oh, maybe I don't want to do this, but like, all right, I know this is like making me work towards my goals. So this is kind of like one of those things that you can have just, whether it's a wearable or just on your phone. In mass, actually, literally I was reading it this morning, there was a new study that just came out, like I guess just this year, so recently, about food trackers, and like, did that increase the prevalence of eating disorders, right? Because obviously there is the potential for that, and there's been some observational studies that have shown that there's a higher incidence of eating disorders and disordered eating tendencies, which that kind of gets murky, like what does that actually mean, because there's different operational definitions, but there can be some issues with those, right? And observational data.
I mean, even the definition for eating healthy now is like,
all of that.
So I saw a post the other day where it was like,
what does that mean?
As soon as I like something that someone posted, like a meme saying that because I don't eat junk food, everyone assumes that I'm on some sort of diet. Like, that's how eating healthy, like how foreign eating healthy is. Like, that's just so crazy to think about.
Yeah, or the idea that like if you have a little bit of something that is like something that's sweet, like now you're not eating healthy. You're like, wait, why can't we have both things?
Yeah, or because I don't order like a bun with every burger. Like, everyone's like, oh, you're on a diet. You're like, no, I just
didn't want that.
Like, I'm just trying to like balance my lifestyle for when I have ice cream later. Like, so
we're gonna be eating something later, and we don't need to have this shitty bun. But this was it. So there is that observational data, but this was a randomized control trial, which is an actually intervention based. So it's going to be a control group and then an actual like intervention. So this is far superior to actually seeing trends. So what they did was it was like 100 college age students. 100 college-age women who did not have previous experience tracking, and they did not have previous experience like with eating disorders. So it wasn't, everybody was kind of at the same baseline with all that. Half of it was control, half of it was, hey, track your food in MyFitnessPal for a month, and they just looked at all these different things, like so many different scales of just different like body image assessment and eating disorder questionnaires and all that type of stuff. And really they showed that nothing changed. Like, there was no increased prevalence of eating disorders or anything of that nature. Really, there was no increase in really anything that was negative whatsoever. These people weren't dieting. It wasn't like they were actively changing what they were doing, but it was just more to see like, is this habit influencing your other habits essentially? Now, this was only a month, and they weren't actively changing stuff. So his interpretation of this, and just in general, which I thought was good feedback, was a lot of that observational research, it's kind of like what came first, right? Like the chicken or the egg. Like,
right.
Did you have an eating disorder and then you were drawn to tracking your food, or did tracking your food create an eating disorder? Yes.
As like kind of like a vice.
Yes, who's drawn to these types of behaviors.
Right.
It's just like when we talk about competing, like who's drawn to these types of things. People who are extreme, people who are perfectionists, people who are neurotic. Like, you're probably not gonna finish a contest prep unless you have some of those characteristics. You know what I mean? Maybe not all of them, but some of them. So it's kind of one of those things, like, how does that influence it? But that was interesting that at least there was that RCT that just did come out. I know there was another study that was a little bit different, more about like activity that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so there's actually two neat studies that I'm thinking about off the top of my head. I don't have the research in front of me.
Remember,
neat and capital NEAT. Well, that doesn't help me spelling it.
Yeah, we're like, neat!
Yeah, the two studies on this topic that I'll do my very best to kind of paraphrase. So there was one that looked at steps and NEAT and appetite regulation. And they were able to find, it was a review, that there was sort of like a U-shaped curve in terms of how many steps someone had in a day or was able to complete in a day, and how much over their maintenance caloric intake they would eat. And in this paper, they found that around like 7,000 to 8,000 steps for the average person was kind of that sweet spot. Whereas if you were more sedentary than 7,000 steps per day, those people tend to eat a lot more, or they tend to feel a little bit hungry. And I can attest to that as well. Like when I'm just kind of like laying around all day, I'll find myself more drawn to just eating more, or like I'm a little bit hungrier. Yeah. Whereas if I'm a good amount of active, I feel like my appetite is regulated. And then like this is obvious for people who are at 10,000 steps or above, they are obviously much hungrier because they are a lot more active. So their appetites were a lot higher, and they tend to eat over their maintenance intake. And I'm not saying like 7,000 to 8,000 steps is a perfect prescription for everyone, but that's just a super interesting observation that this review found. And there was another study published in Mass that looked at NEAT activity in athletes. So they took a cohort of people who were already resistance trained for at least 1 year. They were powerlifters, bodybuilders, etc. And they looked at trunk fat based off of how active they were outside of training. And I think this is a super important study, right? Because when we have a questionnaire and someone fills it out for coaching, and we ask them, like, are you sedentary? Are you a bit more active? People will think that training 4 to 5 times a week for an hour a day is like super active, when that's really not. And during the rest of the day, they're sitting at a desk. And so this study looked at people who had resistance trained for at least a year, for at least 4 times a week, and their lifestyle outside of their training. And obviously the individuals who had a higher step count and were a bit more active had lower amounts of trunk fat, and also experienced better performance benefits as well, and like better recovery.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and so I don't know if this was like asked through a questionnaire, because it was kind of more of an observational study, but that was super interesting as well. Like as an athlete, as someone who trains 60 to 90 minutes a day, 5 to 6 times a week, that also shows like I can't be lazy throughout the rest of the day either if I want to maintain a body composition that I'm comfortable with, if I want to recover better, because movement throughout the day, not like killing yourself, but that's also really good for recovery, not just being sedentary all the time.
100%. And like we talked about, you just feel better.
Oh yeah. I feel way less achy. Like
when I feel more energized too when I do more. Again, there's always going to be that U-shaped curve, right? Doing too little and then doing too much, but there really is that kind of sweet spot. And I think that it's not as hard as we think it is to increase, our activity. And really just if you go for let's say you do go for the walks, right? That's a few thousand steps. If you get 2 to 3, it's gonna be 2 to 3,000 extra steps. Like that's 2 to 3, 10-minute walks. That's probably a really good addition to what you're doing. And that's a really interesting, even if it is observational, like a lot of good research comes out of observational things. Like that's how science starts. Like you have to observe things and just okay, we're gonna look at these patterns. And we see that, we've seen that with ourselves, we've seen that with our clients. And I do feel like when you're more sedentary, You do feel not just like I feel less energy for sure. Part of that too, I think.
I feel like I'm like a bit
just
more
a little
brain
slower.
fog. Yeah.
I think part of the energy too, though, comes from the fact that I try to do a lot of the walks outside.
Yeah.
That does, I think, help just with like the obviously sun exposure and just like being able to like visually see like very far and out versus like being inside, which is like very closed. So I think part of that is likely being outside. But even if not, even if I am doing something inside, whether it's like a bike or even in the gym, like just doing a little bit of, getting on the treadmill to start or finish a workout. If I'm like, okay, I can't really do much else today, let me at least do this.
Yeah.
And it's not really like cardio necessarily, like I'm not like killing it. But I do feel better and definitely less hungry, which is funny. Now there is a period where you end up doing a lot and you're like, damn, like I'm starving.
You're like truly in a deficit.
You're actually now in a deficit.
Yeah.
So that is important, like again, to recognize where you're at, but maybe you do want to be in a deficit, so that's a really easy way to do that. And to kind of finish this out, like some practical step goals for clients. So there's a lot of different ways that people handle this. I know there are some coaches that like to prescribe step counts, not just for daily living, but like for a deficit. And I've heard the explanation, which does make sense, is it's not just because say you're doing, like say you're like, hey, I have a 30-minute session, right, of cardio. Like let's say you have 5 30-minute sessions and you're like really not feeling it that day. You know what I mean? So you're going to inevitably take less steps if you're going slower. Or some people will track calories. I've heard of that like as like a like calories burned per session, right? Because say you are feeling really lazy that day or really tired, you might only hit arbitrary numbers, but 200 calories burned. Versus if you instead said, no, my sessions need to be 300 calories, some days that might be 20 minutes, some days that might be 40 minutes, depending on the expenditure you're putting out. So I understand that. I'm like, I don't know, I feel like it's so tough to regulate with like actually knowing like the calorie burn.
Right.
But so some people do that, some people just do steps. Like they don't necessarily say, hey, you have to hit this much cardio. They'll just prescribe a certain amount of steps. I like to do a combo. I like to be like, hey, all right, like here's your set cardio for the week, split it up, how you like. And then, if clients do ask or they, if I do kind of say, hey, like, where are steps at? Like, where are we at activity wise? Then we'll kind of set like a target there. But I think it's something that doesn't need to be, like, even if you don't have a tracker, right? Like not like a perfect tracker. I think the phone. The phone has one.
Like,
so
depending on GPS.
So like it, not saying that you need to have your phone on you at all times, but take it with you for like 2 days, right? Just to get like a baseline. Okay, if I do this is about how many steps that I'm getting. And then that way like I don't need to look at the data every day. I mean, I have it because it's I'm literally on the ring. But I know, okay, on a daily basis, if I do like, if I get like a 20-minute walk in, like broken up, and I work out, and then I, whatever, or maybe I go do some errands, or I'm doing stuff around the house, like I hit about X, right? And then anything that varies outside of that, didn't get the walks in, or I didn't work out today, or I didn't, I was just literally stuck at my desk all day. Like I know that's gonna be a low day, and then there's gonna be some days that are a lot higher just based on whatever's going on. So it's not even something that you have to track like so perfectly every day, I think, to get the benefits. I feel like it's more about just getting that baseline and understanding what you need to do on a daily basis in order to come pretty close to that.
Yeah, when prescribing steps, if I need to at all, like I'll just ask the client, like, hey, what is your lifestyle like? Do you sit at a desk 8 hours a day? Or like maybe are you a bartender and you move a lot? Like, so it really depends on the person. And I'll do the same thing. I'll always prescribe a mix, like here's this many minutes of cardio that I want us to get done over the week. Here are your steps. Obviously your because that's a question. It's like, do I have to do steps outside of those cardio? And I'm like, no, just whatever steps you get in with your cardio, like that is toward your weekly step count.
Because cardio is technically different than steps. When we're just talking about going for these easy
steps
walks.
During cardio count.
So like cardiovascular benefits, if you haven't listened, refer back to our cardio episode. cardiovascular benefits are, you have to be at a certain intensity, right? But just the activity and the low intensity steps do have their own benefits as well. Just going to be a little bit different than like cardiovascular adaptations. And of course, when we're talking about calories burned, if we're talking about being in a deficit, going at a harder pace is certainly going to burn more calories than just walking around the block. But if you sandwich that in, that's still going to help you with your goals. So they're not mutually exclusive, they're just different.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
And yeah, there's no perfect step number. I think a lot of people want that. I try to say between 8 to 12, right? Because some people are just going to be active because of their work.
Yeah.
Some people are going to be really inactive, so we need to kind of work up to that 8.
Yeah.
I know 10,000 has been like that kind of number that
for whatever
that has been.
I know one of my clients who does 20,000 steps every single day.
Damn.
That's like her normal. Like she feels very.
Ooh.
Like,
yeah, that's a lot.
Fine doing that.
Yeah, see, I'm around that kind of 10 because I know that sometimes this will pick up more just based on like if I am doing a lot with my hands or like whatever. So,
but that counts as neat. So like that's what I look at steps as. It's
exactly.
Like how much movement am I getting in?
Yeah, but I would say I'm typically like around that, and then when I go above, like if I'm walking a lot of places or whatever, like that's when it's going to be like 15, 17, that kind of stuff. But yeah, 20, that's moving. Like you're doing a lot of shit.
Are you okay? And she's like, yeah. Like this is,
I'm fine.
I like this. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah, and she could just like to be active and then also has like an active job and whatever. I think that's just a really big determinant. We sit to work, so most people are going to be doing that. So if that's your situation, you're going to have to go and do some extra steps. You're going to have to go and do that. If you maybe are...
I'm definitely one of those people where like I have to go out of my way to get them steps because
me too.
As a student and a coach, like I'm pretty sedentary.
Yeah. And even though we are people who train multiple days a week, we would still be considered sedentary people just because of everything else. So we go out, I would say like because we walk and we do these other things, we're not sedentary, but we would be otherwise. So moral of the story, do you need to track your steps? No, but it can be useful.
I'm a big proponent of it.
Yeah. I think it doesn't need to be something that you have to track every single day. But having that kind of baseline number and knowing, all right, for me to be at a healthy level, this is kind of where I need to be. I think that is really the best answer. And if you want to track them every day, you can. If you like having that feedback, you like having that accountability, it gives you something to strive towards, it kind of keeps you in check. That's a really good thing. But if you maybe don't want to get something like an Oura Ring or have the means or whatever it is, just figure out, okay, 1 or 2 days, where is this baseline? What do I need to get above that? And then just
it could even be
hit that.
It can even be as simple as like, okay, how many hours a day do I spend sitting at my desk? All right, so this week let me just throw in a post-dinner walk for 20 minutes. Yeah. Or like a post-lunch walk or first thing in the morning. So
there's just all the benefits like build upon each other. You know what I mean? Like sunlight exposure, being outside, post-meal digestion and insulin control, and like all of these things, just like, and then the steps, like it all just goes together. So we really can't recommend. I know this sounds so silly, but that's I think what is so like great about it is that it is so easy. It just takes a little bit of your time, but it's not so much time that like you said, like you have to like, I need to like run a marathon to like be in shape. It's not like that.
You don't need to get like a $2,000 Peloton bike. Like you don't need to like it's like
good for a sneaker outside.
Yeah, like literally I think that is when it comes to just like communicating health to people, like health education, it's really about like, okay, what is the bare minimum that we can do, especially if you're someone who's starting from ground zero, and then just build up from there. Because I think that when you kind of throw like track all your macros 24/7 and like train 6 days a week all at once, it can be a lot. And so that would be great if for whatever reason you need to do that one day, but like start simple and just continue to build up from there. And like this is, I think, neat non-exercise activity thermogenesis is that baseline. It's like, okay, let's just try to increase your movement throughout the day. It's like entry level for anyone that can improve upon. So
yeah, I would say if somebody was like, what's like the most important stuff to do? Eat more protein, resistance train a few times a week, and make sure your like daily activity is at an adequate level. I feel like if people just did those 3 things, they would be, you're covering so many of the bases. Like, and we'd be in a much better position. Like, if everybody did that, it would be so much healthier. So if you guys are listening to this and you already are really active, and you already have this in check, just share like with people who maybe don't know this, because you know, like we talked about, there's a big barrier to entry with a lot of this stuff, and this isn't. Like, this is such a low barrier that everybody can do, and you can start really small, even if it's a 3-minute walk, right? Like, just adding this in and just being a little bit more active. So as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe, all of those things. Go to our YouTube channel. We are also putting up short like edits of the podcast as well, so there'll be like some shorter clips instead of like the full length, so you guys can check those out on our YouTube channel. And then if you have any other questions for us or want to apply for coaching, you can visit teamliquidfit.com. So thank you guys, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.